Live updates from Elon Musk and Sam Altman's court battle over the future of. The consensus read is already outdated. What matters now is the second-order effect most commentary still ignores. We will map trigger, incentive shift, and downstream impact before the close. This is not a minor dispute. This is a fight over the structure of the most valuable AI company in the world. Here is what happened. Back in 2015, Elon co-founded OpenAI as a non-profit. The mission was clear: build artificial general intelligence that benefits all of humanity. No profit motive. No venture capital. Just pure research. Then, in 2019, everything changed. OpenAI created a for-profit subsidiary. Sam Altman became CEO. Microsoft invested billions. Suddenly, the company that was supposed to stay independent became deeply entangled with one of the world's largest tech corporations. Elon's lawsuit argues this violates the original mission. OpenAI promised to be open source, transparent, and aligned with humanity. Instead, it became proprietary, closed, and profit-driven. GPT-4 is not open. The training data is secret. The governance is opaque. But here is where this gets complicated. Sam Altman says the lawsuit is baseless. He argues that the non-profit structure was always meant to support a for-profit arm. That venture capital was necessary. That competition and profit incentives actually drive faster AI safety research. That Elon is trying to sabotage OpenAI because his own AI company, xAI, is a competitor. This matters because the outcome determines the future of OpenAI's governance. If Elon wins, the court could force OpenAI to return to non-profit structure, open source its models, or dissolve the for-profit subsidiary entirely. That would crater its valuation and reshape the entire AI industry's incentive structure. If Sam wins, it sets a precedent. Non-profit founders can create for-profit subsidiaries without restrictions. Venture-backed AI companies can operate however they choose. The race for AGI becomes a pure capitalist competition, with no regulatory or ethical guardrails embedded in corporate structure. The second angle nobody is talking about: this lawsuit will likely take 18 to 24 months to resolve. During that time, OpenAI continues to operate, train models, and ship products. The legal process is too slow to stop the march of AI development. By the time this resolves, GPT-5 or GPT-6 might already exist. The winner might control the legal structure, but the loser has already lost the technological race. For builders and investors, this signals something critical. The AI industry is consolidating around a few megalabs: OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, Meta. The lines between non-profit research and for-profit competition are blurring everywhere. If you are building an AI startup, you need to pick a side. Either you align with one of these giants, or you position yourself as the anti-monopoly alternative. For developers in India specifically, this matters because access to frontier models is suddenly uncertain. If OpenAI loses market share or splits, where does that leave the millions of students and startups building on GPT? They lose the easiest, cheapest inference endpoint. Competitors like Anthropic, xAI, or open source models become more critical. The entire stack shifts. For regulators globally, this is a wake-up call. The AI industry cannot police itself through lawsuits alone. There needs to be legislation around governance structures, transparency, and alignment. The EU AI Act, Senate bill proposals, and India's AI regulatory frameworks are all moving slower than this court case will resolve. Here is what to monitor over the next 72 hours. Expect OpenAI to release a public statement defending its governance. Expect Elon to leak internal emails or documents that support his claim. Expect industry figures to pick sides. Some will say Elon is right to call out profit motive. Others will say he is a hypocrite, given his track record with Tesla and X. Expect market volatility. Microsoft stock might dip on OpenAI. Uncertainty. xAI might get a small bump as Elon's alternative. The deeper implication: this lawsuit is not really about law. It is about narrative. It is about who gets to define what responsible AI development looks like. If Elon frames it as a fight for AI safety and open science, he wins the culture war even if he loses the court case. If Sam frames it as a fight to accelerate AI progress for humanity, he keeps the momentum even if the legal structure changes. Watch what the major AI labs do next. Will Anthropic, xAI, or others issue statements about their own governance? Will open-source models like Llama accelerate to prove they are the real alternative to centralized for-profit labs? Will governments finally move on AI regulation, or will they wait to see how this case settles? This is the moment where the AI industry's structure gets decided, not by technology, but by courts and capital. That shift, alone, is worth paying close attention to. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next. Watch the execution timeline, second-order market effects, and policy response to gauge what happens next.